So the other day, I was kind of looking at gaming in general, and I was noticing how gaming in reality was getting smaller. More specifically, how it's drastically changed from the early 2000s and the early 90s. And that big change was the amount of consoles we had. Now we have the big three. I don't like calling it the big three because I kind of consider PC to be its own thing separate from the Xbox, the PlayStation, and the Nintendo Switch. Some people might argue that PC is just Microsoft, and so Xbox PCs, I don't really see as the same because you also have Apple Macs that you can game on, and you can even, if you want to, custom make your own PC with no Microsoft products whatsoever, and even a different operating system, I think is potentially possible. I don't know, I haven't been in PC for a while. So, I kind of see it as the big four, and back in the early 2000s, it was five with Sega, and back in the 90s, it was a madhouse for the amount of consoles there were. Philips was trying to make its own console, Panasonic was trying to make its own console, Neo Geo had its own console, you had Atari, you had all of these companies, even Apple was trying to make a console with its Pippin. And so the 90s was a crazy time, and we kind of lost something with it dying off to just three home consoles and PC. And that's innovation. I mean, back in those days, you had insane innovation on these consoles trying to do something different. I mean, how Nintendo tried doing the Virtual Boy, I believe it was called, where it was like supposed to be reminiscent of like virtual reality 3D, but it just burnt out your retinas with that red glare. And so people were trying crazy things, a lot of stuff didn't work, and you still saw crazy innovation in the 2000s with like Nintendo and the Wii. Basically, the idea was, hey, let's get more than just gamers into gaming, because when you hold up a controller to a person who's never seen a controller before, it looks like something that would have controlled the craft that crashed at Roswell, New Mexico back in 47. I mean, I've seen people literally look at a controller like that. And so the idea of the Nintendo Wii was, hey, let's just have something where it's like, here, swing this. Swing it? I don't have to press any buttons? Yeah, just swing it. And that was about it. And so back in those days, you saw innovation. You saw Microsoft and Sony trying to innovate, and it just kind of died. Or at least the innovation died. We still saw great content on the Xbox. Okay. We saw great content on PlayStation 4 and the Wii. No. We saw great content on PlayStation 4 and the Switch. Wii U and Xbox One kind of suffered. Xbox One kind of started making it back to the light by the end of the Xbox One, and now with the Series X, Xbox is doing much better now, unlike those early years. And it kind of led me to think, well, we're down to three consoles now. Is it possible we could potentially get more in the future? And I would say unlikely, but there's a chance. And we did see attempts, case in point, the Ouya or the Ouya or the Ouya. I've heard people call it different things. I've always known it as the Ouya, but a lot of people call it the Ouya and the Ouye. I've heard some people call it the Ouye. I think it's the Ouya. And that seemed really promising. It was going to be pretty affordable. You could play Gears of War on it, and it was going to be customizable, so it was intended for people to just mod the hell out of it and create anything they wanted. And it kind of crashed and burned. It didn't help that it had a crappy controller, and it was just an Android phone in a little box, and You can't even use them now these days unless you heavily modify it. But even then, there are far superior Android phones out now. So that crashed and burned, and then Google came out with Stadia, which honestly would have been awesome if that worked, but it kind of was the writing on the wall when the only exclusive they had was a indie type game called Guilt. Probably should have came out bigger guns, Google. And yeah, you could still do Stadia right now, but it's looking like Google will eventually lead it out to pasture and blow its brains out. But I was thinking, like, what kind of company could come out with a new console? Now, there was that new Mad Catz console that they were supposedly working on, but I don't think they have any exclusives that are going to be on it, so I wouldn't be very optimistic for that one. And I thought of 3 companies that could realistically come out with a new console. Now, the first one is kind of a uninteresting guess, and that's Apple. Now, Apple's tried before, and Apple does have the money to be able to do it, but they are happy with their cell phone gaming apps. They're kind of happy with that price that they're bringing in with those, and I think it's a little unlikely that Apple would try getting into the console market, and I wouldn't even be that interested if Apple tried to bring a console into market. But there are 2 companies that I think could successfully pull off bringing a console to market. Now, the first one is EA. Now, before you start laughing your ass off, because EA has numerous times won Worst Company of the Year. That being said, I believe they have the infrastructure to do a console, and they have the IPs to do the console. Now, granted, some of their IPs, they would be committing suicide making exclusive, like their sports IPs. They're making way too much money on their sports IPs to ever consider making those console exclusive. I mean, good gosh, how many Xbox players get NBA 2K 2027 whenever the next one's coming out, or how many people get Madden, how many on different consoles? It's an insane amount. I mean, those games literally print money for EA, regardless if they're good or not. And so the wrestling games, their UFC games, their soccer games, it'd be insane for them to make those exclusive. But what I mean by them having the IPs to do it, EA has a nasty habit of destroying IPs that they buy. So case in point, they had Dead Space, which is now being revived. They had Crysis, which is now getting a sequel. They have Command & Conquer, which is dead. They have Mercenaries, which is dead. They have Army of Two, which is a dead IP. They have Mirror's Edge, which is another dead IP. And many, many more. Dante's Inferno. I could probably keep racking them off, but you get what I'm saying. They have a lot of dead IPs that if they were to come out with a new console, they could literally just say, boom, new Mirror's Edge, console exclusive to the EA system. Bam, Command & Conquer, exclusive to the EA system. They have so many IPs that they could adapt into console exclusives that they would be able to support themselves on that console exclusivity. A lot of people like to say that it's not the exclusives that sell a console. And look, I'm friends with a lot of these people, but they're kind of idiots. Not you watching, but I have met people who use that as an excuse. They've tried defending the Xbox One like, well, the Xbox One was superior because of the multiplayer. It's like, but you could play all that on PlayStation. It's still superior. Yeah, no, what brings people to consoles are exclusives, okay? If one system has 100 exclusives and another system has 3, people are going to get the console with 100 exclusives, regardless if the 3 are outstanding and the 100 are just so-so. People like quantity, and that's it. Yes, there are people who are going to go for the quality, but you can't make that argument for some consoles. Xbox One. I shouldn't be laughing. I have an Xbox One. I've been enjoying some of the exclusives they have. I'm just being mean. I'm unnecessarily mean. But so I feel that the type of exclusives you have are important to a console. Case in point, what made me get a PS4 was finding out that No Man's Sky was going to be on PC and PS4, and that was it. Eventually it did come out to Xbox One, and is now currently coming out to Switch, unless I don't get this out on time. But you get what I mean. Exclusives help sell consoles. Why did Google Stadia not take off? Maybe because they had only one exclusive that was kind of an indie game and wasn't really a showstopper. You know, maybe they should have tried getting the rights to an old IP that people have been begging to return, like Legacy of Kain. I'm not a huge Legacy of Kain fan, I've never played one, but I know people go freaking nuts with Legacy of Kain, hoping that someone will one day make another one. So, exclusives are very important. They're not as useless as a lot of people like to say they are. And I think EA could realistically come out with a console at some point. They would have to switch their structure around, maybe make a new Frostbite engine that's not so hard to work on, and I don't know, maybe just get a better management of the company. I do think EA is a little unlikely, especially since they're currently looking to sell or merge. At least that's the rumor. Yeah, this report by some guy with the handle Puck sounds real legit. Claims that Juggernaut recently pursued a merger with NBC Universal, but has also held discussions with Amazon, Apple, and Disney. Which all these talks eventually broke down. The man at FIFA maker has not given up. And like there are some sources claiming that Microsoft might buy out EA, which would be a big problem for Sony if they did that. Because right now, Microsoft owns Call of Duty, unless the deal falls through, which I don't think it will. And if they buy EA, they will have access to the two biggest military shooters under their belt. And if they cut those off from Sony, that is going to devastate Sony. So honestly, I think Sony, if EA is on the market, Sony should try and buy EA as fast as possible, just so they can ensure that one of the two biggest military shooters in the history of gaming is preserved to continue on their console. Plus, it's a shit ton of IPs that Sony would be getting their hands on if they put up the money to buy EA. I think it would be a good purchase decision. But moving on to the second company that I believe could make their own console. And surprisingly enough, you may not have heard of them before. Well, you might have heard of them recently. They just bought half of Square Enix, and that's the Embracer Group. I could be saying their name wrong. I'm pretty sure it's Embracer Group. They just bought Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal, among a couple of those studios. And a lot of people were going, what's this Embracer Group? Like, who are they? Like, who are these people? Come to find out, they're a lot like BlackRock. You've heard of that company that supposedly owns, like, everything. Yeah, they're kind of like the BlackRock of the gaming industry, because they apparently own more IPs than Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo. They have an insane amount of game companies under their belt, all owned by them. And they have more video game companies or IPs than Microsoft. Microsoft has 50 game developers under its belt. Embracer is like the Goliath standing over Microsoft. And what's interesting is Embracer has been telling like its stockholders, like, yeah, we're not making money right now, but like by 2024 or something like that, we're going to start seeing a lot of cash coming, because it takes a long time to develop games. They started buying stuff back in like 2016, 2017, and so they're now finally starting to see like profits off of those. And they just bought Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal, which are the companies that made Tomb Raider, the new Avengers game, Deus Ex, Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're saying we're putting a big push towards single-player games. And you look at all the companies that Embracer Group owns, like if they just made a console they would have over 50 companies that could make exclusives for that console. And it would be probably a new contender in the console wars that we're seeing with Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, and PC. And it's kind of exciting, actually. I'm hoping that Embracer actually starts turning a profit so they can actually look at making a console, because they have the infrastructure to do it. They have all these gaming companies that could just start putting out exclusives for them. They own Legacy of Kain, so can you imagine if Embracer comes out with a console and says, yeah, one of the launch days exclusive is going to be a new Blood Omen game? People are going to freaking lose their shit, right? Oh yeah, plus another launch exclusive is going to be a Tomb Raider game. And then we're going to have Darksiders as another exclusive. We're going to have Destroy All Humans as another exclusive. Keep in mind, these people own THQ Nordic. Okay, that company has a lot of games under its belt. I mean, these people, Embracer Group owns an insane amount of video games. It is, I can't even believe it. And I've just heard about them the other week. And so yeah, if anyone's going to make a new console, I would say I'd put my money on them. And so, anyway, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that we're not going to see any more consoles down the road, or do you think that where things are going to start heating up? Do you think that, yeah, this is it, and we're probably even going to lose one of these? I know I'm pointing to old generations, but you know what I mean. Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo. Do you think one of those is going to go under? Some people are saying that Sony's a dead man walking. Those people are idiots. But I think Sony is in trouble with some of the acquisitions that Microsoft's making. So what do you guys think? Let me know. And don't forget to do the thing. You know, the thing. My name is Christopher Kyle with 11 Hour Reviews, and that will be all.